The first volume of the report details numerous efforts emanating from Russia to influence the election. This volume includes a discussion of the Trump campaign's response to this activity, as well as our conclusion that there was insufficient evidence to charge a broader conspiracy. If we had had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. The introduction to the Volume 2 of our report explains that decision. It explains that under long-standing department policy, a president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office.
Remember, Washington Babylon is way better than Chapo Tree House because we're not Democrats.
Welcome again to the Washington Babylon podcast. This week, Ken, Andrew, Sydney Leathers, and Alana Goodman discuss the presidential election. Then, Andrew interviews journalist Sam Husseini about his vote pact strategy. Listeners, this is Andrew here. We've got an exciting lineup for you today. We've got a total of 3 folks on the line. We've got Ken Silverstein, host of the show, and Sydney Leathers, who has previously written for us, is back on and is here to offer her take on a number of topics that have developed over the past several months. And then we also have, for the first time ever, Alana Goodman. So I think, Alana, if you can introduce yourself and give listeners a quick 5-second bio.
Sure. I am an investigative political reporter at the Washington Examiner, so I've been covering a lot of the presidential candidates and will be continuing to do that throughout the campaign.
Awesome. Now, Sydney, how do you like to introduce yourself?
Oh, that's a tough one. Societal leper, sex worker, writer,
Awesome. So let's go at it. What shall we start the conversation with? Because it's been interesting in the last couple of days.
Well, I think I'd love to just talk, even though it's sort of boring when NBC or CNN or the New York Times does it, but I think we can do a better job because they are shit outlets and publications. Excuse me, Andrew can censor anything that makes Alana uncomfortable. I think we can make the presidential election interesting. And I find that when I was about to say when I watch TV news or read the newspaper, but I really don't do either of those things because they bore me. But, we do have a presidential election coming up in 2020. We have a president who, as far as I can tell, is at the peak of his popularity, and who is, in my opinion, a master communicator, whatever one thinks of his politics, and I have a lot of problems with his politics. I can't see any Democrat beating him. I think the race is over, barring a 1929 stock market collapse. What sex scandal could damage Donald Trump? The Mueller investigation was revealed to be, in my view, a hoax and a fraud perpetrated by Democrats trying to distract the country from the fact that they have no ideas. And, it was great for TV news and newspapers that got a lot of readers. So they, have been, for the last few years, pitching and pumping out this bogus narrative. Well, that's gone. So what is it, I'd be curious what you two think about is there a Democrat who can challenge Trump? And if so, who is it?
I'm going to be very boring on this and say Joe Biden. I really do think he has the best prospects. He's, as much as he does have his faults, he's got some charisma. He's somebody he's just a likable guy. And he's got the experience. I don't know. I don't see Democrats really being excited about him, but I think that they want Trump out enough that, there'll be turnout and people will come out to vote for him.
I'm about to be really depressing and say I actually think that Trump is going to get reelected. And I was one of the only people that that I talked to that thought he was going to be elected in the first place, and I'm not rooting for him at all. I cannot stand him. I really don't agree with him on anything, so it sucks to say that, but I just think there's a big chunk of people out there, and I live in the Midwest, so I know these people that like all the crazy shit that he puts out there, you know. Yeah. He is still kind of popular, all things considered, unfortunately. So, yeah, I just don't see anybody on the left that's going to be able to take him on. I don't know. Not anything that I'm seeing right now is making me think
that's a good point, though. Like, people who did support him in 2016, like, I really don't know anybody who supported him in 2016 and has since said, well, you know, I don't like how he's operated and I'm not going to support him again in 2020. Right. You know, it's like he still has the same people.
Yes, they knew who he was then and now. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't think he's lost any support. Although if somebody like Biden then is able, but if somebody like Biden is able to reach out to more, blue collar workers and places like Pennsylvania, that could.
But can I interject for a second here? Because, well, a couple of things. The fact that Biden, and you may be right, he may be the strongest candidate. Organizationally, he's been around forever, so the Democratic machine will rally around him. The Democratic machine will rally around anyone they think can beat Trump, except Bernie Sanders. So I want to talk about Sanders a little, because that's the great left hope. And certainly of the candidates running, I have a lot of problems with Bernie. I actually registered to vote for the first time in years. I stopped voting because it's such a joke. When was
the last time you voted?
I voted for Obama in 2000, not the first time because my kids asked me to, but I don't think I voted for president since, and I don't vote at the local level. But I registered because I'm going to be active in my community, which is a mostly African American and Caribbean and Ethiopian community in Washington D.C., and I'm gonna start attending the advisory committee meetings and be active there. I still probably won't vote for the presidential election because in D.C. the Democrats
vote, and I don't vote. I've never voted, so in D.C. it's not if you're voting for a presidential candidate. Doesn't really matter. I think DC was like 98% Hillary Clinton, something like that. So
it's a waste of time. Exactly. So the Democrats going to get the electoral vote. So why get off the sofa? But hold on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let me just get to. I'm taking too much time here. But okay, Biden. I think Trump can actually eat into the Democratic blue collar vote the way Reagan did in 1980. Like I couldn't stand Reagan.
I think that's what's going to happen.
It is because look, but it's not totally irrational. And Sydney, I'm from St. Louis. I'm from an old industrial town, and I know the Midwest very well. That's my blood. The thing is, though, also that Trump's policies on some issues important to blue collar workers and are way better than Democratic policies. I mean, that's just a fact. It's not speculation. Yeah. I mean, and some of his policies that drive the establishment mad, like tariffs, are very popular with blue-collar workers. And you know what? They make some sense. They're not stupid policies. And he is right to try to bring pressure on China. And whether he's full of shit or not, and doesn't intend really to, maybe he doesn't care about blue-collar workers. That's something only Donald Trump can answer. But some of his policies are better. So he will eat into that vote. So how are the Democrats
and I think
Florida?
He speaks their language, too, because he's going to speak their language on the social issues, So that's what they want to hear, unfortunately,
Right.
They're going to like the anti-abortion stuff. They're going to like all of that. So
on Biden, what about the fact that he's still touching young girls in this way that some people say is inappropriate? Do you think that that's going to catch on and be a problem for him? Because, it's come out, and people have been talking about this forever, right? He's creepy. It was a joke in The Onion for a while. But, the Me Too movement, this is obviously going to be something that people focus on. And does it matter though, or is he just being friendly? That's what I can't really figure out for myself.
Even if he's just being friendly, it's a violation. I would be extremely upset if some guy that I don't know is touching me without my consent. Nobody wants that.
Can I throw something out there?
Yes.
Okay. This is a story carried in August 2017 on NPR, so I'm not certain how reliable it is because I think sometimes they tilt towards the Democrats in far too much of a biased fashion. But the headline is, here's how many Bernie Sanders supporters ultimately voted for Trump, and it goes to make the claim of 1 in 10 who voted in the primaries for Sanders ended up voting for Trump in the general. And I think that crossover weighs heavily on what chance Trump would have against Sanders.
Well, that's what I wanted to get to. One final comment about Biden, and then I want Sydney and Alana to opine about what chance Sanders has and what they think of Sanders, or to the extent possible that, Alana, you can talk about that. But on Biden, I mean, Trump, of course, like a lot of women don't like him, understandably. I mean, his behavior is disgusting. But Biden, I think that is a big issue. At Washington Babylon, we have a meme of the day that Elliot Sperber, the new arts and entertainment, which we call aesthetics and anesthetics, Elliot is editing that section, and his meme of the day today, he just had a picture of Biden, and it says first I sniff them, then I stiff them. I mean, we're a lefty, but we're not a liberal publication. We're a lefty publication, but that's out there. His behavior is disgusting. I mean, that's going to cost him. Some women, I mean, they're not going to go vote for Trump, but they may stay home. They may go, look, this is just...
Yeah, I don't know that I would vote for Biden, actually. That's not the only reason, but that is part of it for sure, so...
That's what
I'm
extremely,
I'm extremely liberal, so...
Yeah. I mean, if he hadn't done that, though, if he hadn't had this history with women, would you consider it more voting for him, or would you...
A little, but
he was already off the table.
I would consider it a little more, but he's still one of my least favorite options, which is unfortunate because I do kind of agree with you that he might be the most electable, which is frustrating because that's like one of the people I would be the least motivated to actually get out and vote for. Mm-hmm. I didn't vote in 2016 as a candidate, and that was the first election since I had turned 18 that I hadn't voted in. So that was actually like a big deal to me. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, okay, I might have to set out another one. I don't know. Well, I think I would possibly vote for...
What if he chose...
I don't know.
Yeah. What if, if Biden chose Tulsi Gabbard or... I don't know. I'm trying to think of somebody who would be... Because I don't think...
I want somebody who's, like, a true progressive. That's what I am, like, dying for. So that's why, even though Bernie and Elizabeth Warren aren't great on, like, sex-related issues, and that's a big deal to me, I think they would be the people that would enact the most change, I guess. I hate to even sound hopeful because I feel like that's too idealistic, but I am at least a tiny bit hopeful with those two versus everybody else.
I agree with you. I agree with you. I like Bernie better than Warren. I just don't like the fact that generationally, Bernie is an old Jewish guy. I mean, he's even older than me, thank God. It's not, I mean, we need a younger, progressive, somebody to rally around. In terms of Biden, and then I want to ask both of you what you think Bernie's chances are. But in terms of Biden, I would never vote for him. I would never vote for Biden. I mean, it's not just the sexual improprieties. The guy is a tool of the Democratic Party, and he's a tool of big donors, just like Barack Obama was.
Yeah, that's kind of my problem with him, too. I agree. He's too moderate, and he's made so many bad decisions in the past, and I just don't know.
He's just a bad decision.
Yeah,
I mean, and
there's no way.
Long history. Like one of the stories that I've been writing about was his history on desegregation in schools, and he was pretty much the top Northern Democrat opposing busing in the Senate. He was
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
a lot of legislation on. Yeah, you gotta read my story and but yeah, he was really out front on this, and it was because it was what his constituents wanted at the time. This was this was in the 1970s and 1980s. But when you have somebody who's been in politics that long, you're going to have a track record like that, and that's another issue with his age, not just how he looks and how he sounds,
That's right.
but also everything that
Who he
he's
is.
done throughout the decades in his career.
Yeah. The only thing I really liked that Joe Biden ever did was after 9/11, he ran for president. I don't even remember what year it was, but he mocked Rudy Giuliani during a debate, and he said something like, the only thing Rudy knows how to say is a noun, a verb, and 9/11, which I thought was hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
He may have stolen it.
That.
I
I do
mean,
remember that.
he is a known plagiarist, so it could have been a speechwriter who came up with that gem. But I like the fact that he delivered it, even if he didn't write it. So, but otherwise, he's a hack. There's nothing. I will definitely sit on my couch eating potato chips if he's the Democratic option. So, what about Bernie, though?
So, too.
What do you two think? What do you think of Bernie's chances, both of you?
He's a wild card, I
chance.
think. I don't know. I think he's a wild card.
If you
I
want
would
to
have really good or really
Hold
bad.
on, one at a time. Hey, I'm going to interrupt. Sydney, go first.
I want to hear what Sydney says. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think he's like the wild card candidate. It's going to be either really good or really bad, and there will be no in between, and I'm just not sure which way it's going to go. I could see it going either way, honestly. I think either he's going to really motivate young people and minorities and blow Trump out of the water, but I don't know. I still kind of think it's Trump's to win. I don't know. I don't see him losing for some reason.
I think the Democratic establishment does not want him to win. And
I agree.
Unless he's able to get, unless he's, there's this huge groundswell of support for him, unless that happens, I just don't see how he gets through it. Because and I think it's less likely that that's going to happen now than it was in 2016, because in 2016 there were way fewer candidates in the field. Now the vote is split. Although who knows? I mean, this is how Trump won, right?
Right.
How
Yeah. That's what I mean by the wild
so
card.
many different people. Yeah. So yeah, I guess I agree with that. I think that he is a wild card.
Here's my thing that comes to mind is last time he had a really kind of inept shit show campaign that was magnetizing towards him, something that had pre-existed him and was far better than what he deserved in terms of just the quality of what he was able to do. This time he's got the entire Democratic Socialists of America, which inside certain pockets of progressive echo chambers is exploded and become gigantic.
That's true. So AOC, for example, her chief of staff was a big Bernie guy. And her chief of staff has an enormous amount of influence with her. I think that AOC will be with Bernie on this, and I don't, you can't discount what that means, because she's so influential with the Democratic base.
There's no question about it. Her endorsement would be huge. And I know from, my kids, and I don't know, I spend my life walking down the street finding people to talk to, and a lot of them are 18 or 20 or 25. Bernie
As long as they're over
have...
18.
Well, a lot of them are, Bernie does have a tremendous amount of support amongst those people. They're the only thing that excites them. And AOC even more. I mean, my kids love AOC. I actually think, and Andrew has written, that she has a few flaws of her own, but now is not the time to discuss that. But she excites people, even more than Bernie. I wish she was old enough to run, because then I definitely would vote for president, just to make a statement. I won't vote for Bernie because, it just doesn't make a statement to me. Generationally, even though his politics are better than anybody's, I have too many problems with the guy, and I don't want to vote for somebody who's, distinctly older than me. So, but I would go out and vote for AOC or this is terrible. I'm drawing a total blank. Not Tulsi. I don't really like her that much, but the Muslim
Rashida
Omar, Representative Omar.
Ilhan Omar.
Yeah, I would definitely vote for her. But,
Oh, God, yes.
But I'm not going to go out and
I
vote
think
for
she's
her.
over.
But my
I think
kids
she's over
will.
35. I think she might be over 35. So maybe who knows?
She's
close.
no, she's not. She's not. She's not going to be 35 at the time of the election. I checked it out.
Oh, she won't. No.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about her politics, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Andrew has written really good critiques of AOC. I mean, the one thing that really interested me in what Andrew has reported is that just like Obama was portrayed as, this outsider fighting the establishment, and that was a total hoax. I mean, he was completely vetted by the Democratic establishment. Vernon Jordan, the ultimate lobbyist, hosted fundraisers for him during the campaign. I mean, this guy was, a total moderate. I mean, he was like Joe Lieberman, but half African American. So that was a joke. I think AOC is way more sincere than Barack Obama, who I detest. But the thing is, as Andrew has written, she worked, this idea that she was just a bartender and came up out of the grassroots and, was just serving drinks. That's garbage. She worked for Ted Kennedy. She worked for him for just 1 year before brain cancer felled him. Didn't you say she came up through, she had how'd she get that job with Kennedy? I mean,
Well, she went to a liberal arts college with a political science and economics program, and then she also came up through a young Latin American organization that trains it's essentially a political finishing program.
Mm-hmm.
And that was either through college or through this institute that she got her kind of teeth cut at. She got this internship.
I would definitely go out and vote for her. Absolutely.
I would
and
too.
Now even
I
more
would too,
so.
for sure.
Yeah, that would be cool. We'd have a gender. I don't think, electing Hillary Clinton is like electing Margaret Thatcher, but electing AOC is cool. We'd have a gender change.
I totally
We'd have
agree.
a racial change. We'd have a real socialist. That I will get off the couch and go for AOC, even if in D.C.
And
the
she's
Democrats
supportive
anyway.
of sex workers.
And what's that?
She's very supportive of sex workers too. So, and that's obviously something that's important to me and something that's really lacking in the current field, even with Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. You think is progressive that they would be a bit more progressive, but they're just not.
Yeah, you wrote about that for Washington Babylon, actually. That really nice piece you did about Warren and her position on sex workers. And those two, I forget the two pieces of legislation, but I'm just forgetting the acronyms. But in any case, AOC would be a breath of fresh air. I actually am optimistic. This is the weirdest thing. I've been pessimistic for since age 3, but I actually think, just because I do talk to a lot of people and I travel a lot, and not just in the U.S., it's a global phenomenon. Capitalism has run out of steam. In the 60s, I think we're going to do better this time. I know, Alana, I know you're going to disagree with this, but I'm a
where is this veering off into?
Well, no, the deal is that in the 60s, you had this explosion of protest on the left, and capitalism recaptured the culture with, conservative think tanks, and then, the Democratic Leadership Council and lobbying and campaign contributions. So they bought back the political system, marginalized lefties and African Americans and the women's movement that were going to take control of the Democratic Party with McGovern. And McCarthy, you had all these really progressive Democrats. And then the superdelegates came along to prevent another McGovern. So we've never, Bernie was the only thing that came close. But what's different for me and why I'm optimistic, and Alana, I know you can disagree, and Andrew, I don't want to implicate you in this, Alana, but from my point of view, we're in better shape this time, because last time the 1% came up with what transitioned into neoliberalism. It started off as reindustrialization, but basically it was let's smash unions, the New Deal is dead, and start distributing wealth upwards. And it did work to the extent that it generated, it generated economic growth. The U.S. was still the dominant world power. But in the end now, we have this, we're Russia and the United States, in my view, are the two most corrupt and corrupt examples of jungle capitalism. So capitalism has no answers now. That's how Trump comes along. He's a clown, but he can keep the circus going for 4 or 8 years. But after that, so I think Trump wins re-election, and then in 2024, you've got AOC or Omar or some killer combination. It's not, I think
AOC is still going to be around in 2024. She's going to keep her seat.
She's going to what?
Keep her seat in New York.
Yeah, and then in 2024, she can run for president or vice president, and there'll be a really progressive ticket in 2024. 2020, I've given up on. Trump's going to win re-election, and I don't,
I know, I feel that way too.
No, it's true, but 2024, that's our turn. Well, for Sydney's turn and my turn. Alana, maybe not. So.
My concern is seeing what the right vomits up next.
Oh, no, I'm scared.
Because...
Well, that is a good question. What comes after Trump? He has no challenger. What comes after Trump?
Well, you look at...
President Roy Moore.
Maybe Steve Bannon jumps in.
Not supporting him.
Oh, God.
Sorry, go ahead. Bannon, yeah.
Alex Jones, president.
Actually, I should not be laughing. That's probably like a 20% possibility.
It could
happen. You never know.
Question, though, because Trump fundamentally changed the Republican Party in a lot of ways. His ideas, like Ken, you were saying earlier, like his positions on trade, those are very unorthodox positions of conservatives. So kind of like what happened with the Republican Party after Trump? It's kind of does it go back? Does it revert to what it was before, or?
No, I think it's going to be this new, more deranged thing.
The thing is, I don't think that Trump is not ideological. It's not like he's
not. No.
Super. You can't call him he's so right wing. Because he's not. His positions are all over the board. So I don't know what the progression is after him. I don't think there is a next logical step because he's just broken the mold so much of what Republicans saw themselves as identity-wise.
Yeah, I think they're going to try to do a repeat. I think they'll do a repeat and find another crazy off-the-wall candidate. I don't think we're going to get another bland Republican for a while. I think they're going to keep
what's
trying.
Wrong with that? I think that's a good thing. I think it's people were tired of having these bland candidates who gave speeches that sounded like everybody else's speech, and I don't think your eyes are glazing over when you're listening to them. So,
I would rather be bored.
It's different.
I'd rather be bored by a dumb George W. Bush type than scared of a crazy, unpredictable Trump type. That's just it's bad either way, but at least with the more bland Republicans, you have more of an idea of what you're going to get. Trump is just, crazy.
But then,
off the wall.
Well, I think Alana, though, and I think you're both making really good points, but I think, and I'm just going to use this to back up my theory about a really cool ticket in 2024. I do think, Alana, you're absolutely right that it's better to have a Trump for everybody than to have a Jeb Bush. Can you imagine? The only reason people paid attention, including myself in 2016, was that it was Trump running against Hillary. And can you imagine if it had been Jeb Bush and Hillary? The ratings, it would have been a catastrophe for CNN and MSNBC and Fox, and, and a catastrophe for the country, too. one could argue 2016 was a catastrophe, but like I'm glad Hillary lost.
But it was also the most exciting election. I think that I will have in my lifetime, and maybe the next one will prove me wrong. But I just
not the
I
next
can't
one.
think
One
of anything. The one after.
2024. You're going to have.
I can't think of anything any more exciting than 2016. I was
2020. No, 2024. You're going to have a AOC type, a young, progressive, really good, maybe better than AOC, running against a far right, like a Steve Bannon type. It's not going to go back to Jeb Bush. They're going to be, in my opinion, the Republicans are going to have to become wackier and wackier. But the thing is, Trump, yeah, but Trump is legitimately wacky. The rest of them, like Pence, to me, are terrifying. They are crazy, but they appear to be sane. So if you have, and that's why I think we're going to win 2024, because you'll have had 2 successive Trump terms. The economy will be shit by then, and you're going to have a young, exciting Democrat and some lunatic Republican who appeals to the absolute, lowest common denominator, who will sweep Alabama with 99.9% of the vote, but will not win the swing voters that Trump is going to win in 2020. This is a Republican who's not going to win on trade policies. And so I think 2024, it's in the bag for a really...
Ken, I got to differ with you. The premonition for Trump that I have seen since the beginning is the Ron Paul campaign, and especially the 2012 one, where they had to smother him.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you get a white nationalist preaching a brand of kind of neo-white nationalist socialism and combine it with some of the libertarian isolationist rhetoric.
Are you talking about Ron Paul?
Yeah.
The white nationalist? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even though he...
The
newsletters, but that whole... I mean, even the people in the Libertarian Party are now saying all the crazy racists that we used to have to kind of push off to the side and say, no, they're not really our people. We just kind of let them vote for us. Austin something, Pennyman or something.
There was that kind of coalition between some segments of the libertarian, movement and some, because it was like we want to kind of create as many voters as we can.
This libertarian leader of the party in 2016 said, look, they've all left. They ran away and they're now in the Trump base. And now they're out and proud.
That's really interesting, but that would make 2024 even more exciting and interesting, way more than 2016. Because the thing about Rand Paul is I find a lot of his social policies repugnant. However, his foreign policy is better than anybody's. I mean, better than Bernie's, as far as I can tell. He actually is against war, as far as I can tell. I don't know where he's been on Venezuela.
You're talking about Ron Paul, not Rand Paul.
No, Rand Paul. The Rand Paul.
Oh, Rand Paul. Okay.
I'm talking now about 2024. And what I'm saying is you're going to have, in my view, you're going to have, a really progressive Democratic ticket, whether it's AOC or somebody like that, versus, I was speculating it would be like a Mike Pence type, but it would be better if it's a Rand Paul, because Rand Paul, I mean, that wing of the party, there is a wing of the Republican Party that appeals to me on foreign policy and a few other issues, because they sincerely are opposed to the U.S. empire and recognize that the U.S. does not have the right, for example, in Venezuela, which I care passionately about, to just decide that Venezuela's president is not who the people elected, even if the election was not entirely free and fair. Well, just like Saudi Arabia's or China's, but we don't, change. We don't just say we're changing the president. So, I mean, to me, if you had a Rand Paul type Republican running against a progressive Democrat like AOC in 2024, that would be ideal. Then we would have an actual debate of ideas, and it would force AOC, it would actually force the Democrats to the left on foreign policy, because typically they're forced to the right, they opt to go right, because, Hillary had to show just like Obama, that, well, I'm trying to find a substitute word for what I want to say, but they, Hillary and Obama didn't want to appear to be soft on foreign policy, so they were goaded, and I think their instincts are bad too, but they had to prove they were tough. So Obama was bombing 7 countries by the time he left office. Hillary, God knows, Trump's foreign policy has not been great, and I hate what he's doing in Venezuela and elsewhere, but Hillary, I think, would have been worse. So it would be really, really interesting. Hey, I'll vote for AOC and Rand Paul if AOC's president and Rand is vice. That's my 2024 ticket. But at least I want to hear those two people or those two wings of thought arguing in 2024.
I think that would be really interesting.
Yeah, the country needs that debate.
Which is what Trump and Bernie Sanders have, I guess, both did in 2016 was to open up a conversation on subjects that were previously that both parties were very narrowly confined to certain issues, and it took a long time to make any shifts on that. And I think that they both did that in their own parties. So closer to home, what do you think about impeachment? Do you think that Democrats are going to go for it, and do you think that
no, they're too spineless and weak? They won't do it.
And they also but the Mueller report, there is information, I think, that's very damaging about Trump that is still going to come out. But my view is he didn't commit high crimes and misdemeanors. He didn't commit impeachable offenses unless they find that there was a cover-up or something post-presidential. But he didn't collude with Russia. At least it hasn't come out yet. Maybe something still will. That he colluded in some way, or his campaign colluded with Russia through WikiLeaks or something like this. That would be a problem.
But it was just so much. There was so much effort and money that was put into this investigation by Mueller, and they didn't find enough to
exactly. That's why I don't
charge anybody in his inner circle.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly right. The whole Russiagate thing was a fraud. So it's not, look, I detest Trump for the most part. 20%, I like the fact that he's exactly the asshole he says he is. I admire the openness with which he expresses himself. I admire that he drives the establishment batshit. I like that about him. And there are a few of his policies I like, but overwhelmingly I dislike the man and everything he stands for. But I don't think he committed anything that's impeachable, at least to my knowledge, and I haven't seen anything. And with Russiagate collapsing, and as long as even if he did, the Republicans won't vote to impeach him. Impeachment is a political process. The Democrats don't have the votes at this point, and they're spineless. But I also think they don't have the case. And so I don't think.
What about the issue of, Democrats generally, they hadn't had control of the House in years, and they finally got control, and it's like, do people, I think, want, they're saying, show us your policies, show us what is the alternative to Trump, what is the alternative to Republicans, and they're focused on reinvestigating this issue that Mueller already investigated. So there's that aspect, and there's also the fact that the media was really caught up in this for, since 2016 in this investigating this Russia issue, and that is time that could have been spent looking into, every administration has issues. Every administration has things that need to be brought to light by good investigative reporting, and people kind of spent the last couple of years chasing after something that turned out to be nothing. So
that's what I think too. But Sydney, what do you think? Do you think Trump has committed? I know you don't like him, and we're in large agreement on that. But I don't think he should be impeached. I think he should be voted out of office. Do you think he's committed?
My thing is, I don't necessarily think that he's done something that's an impeachable offense, but I think the Democrats are fucked if they don't try to do something, or at least make the appearance that they're trying to do something. I think every time Nancy Pelosi opens her mouth lately, she's pissing off the base. The base doesn't want to hear, we're not going to impeach him. So they're really fucking up there and missing the mark. You know, even if they thought that this is not something that they would be able to accomplish, I think not even trying is worse somehow.
I think that makes that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I mean, my God, Pelosi and Schumer. I mean, talk about a way to just like dampen. Like, can you imagine? Like, you could have the most fun party in the world. I mean, you could be having the best time in the world, and those two walk in the room, and it's like, God, can I leave now? I mean, that's the Democrats' problem. There's no, but they don't.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I would party with Pelosi. I don't know about Chuck Schumer.
You what?
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about her. I have mixed feelings about Nancy. In some ways, I like her just because she enrages Republicans, and especially where I live, you know, she's like the devil around here. So I love that aspect. You know, they think she's really scary, and I enjoy that. But really, she's not as like regressive and scary as conservatives think. So she disappoints me on that level. But very mixed feelings on her.
Yeah, me too. No, I'm totally in the tank for the AOC, for lack of a better term. There are members of the liberal wing of the Democratic Party I like better, but she is the most prominent. You know, I would just say the AOC wing. I'm all for it, and I really, really just can't bear the old, you know, Obama, Clinton wing of the party. And Pelosi is, you know, I mean, on certain issues, she's fine, but in general, she represents the old generation of, so I want nothing to do with
it. Just a little too moderate for me, too. Yeah, that's my biggest thing. You know, I like her in some ways, and then in others.
She embraces it. Yeah, but she also embraces it. I mean, she doesn't try to be something that she's not, even though she sees the momentum, I think, moving towards this younger generation. You know, Elizabeth Warren was criticized for some of the videos that she's done of her, you know, hanging out and having a beer or something like that. And it's like trying to copy AOC and appeal to younger voters. And I think that that's an issue for Warren, which is like it doesn't seem genuine, you know, and that's something that people want to say is somebody who is genuine.
Yeah, definitely. She seems a little too stage managed. I mean, it may be that she's actually, you know, doing. She's not being told what to do by her advisors. It may just be it's so ingrained at this point. She just seems like such, you know, everything is like poll tested, and she doesn't.
Yeah, I agree with that.
She seems very plastic. So, anyway,
that
so
might
I
be
think
her downfall.
Maybe her downfall, and that's why, we get back to the original question, and I think we probably should wrap this up for everybody's sake, so we can all have a nice evening. But that leads back to the original question. I cannot see. I'm with you, Sydney, on this. I do not see Trump losing in 2020. I mean, barring something.
I hope I'm wrong. Yeah, I hope we're both wrong.
I hope we're both wrong too.
I don't see it either.
Yeah.
I don't like making any predictions after 2016 because that was. I did not think that Trump was going to win that primary like most people, and I definitely didn't think that he was going to win the election, and I was surprised. So, ready to be surprised on this too.
Well, it is true. I mean, it's very, very early, and I mean, things came up in 2016 that were unexpected and unanticipated, and I'm sure things will, similar things will happen in 2020. But barring something really earth-shattering, and looking at the current Democratic crop, even I don't know, it's getting very late in the day for the economy to completely tank before the vote. That I can see affecting the outcome, but it would require something huge, I think, to keep Trump from getting reelected, which, I think is unfortunate. Anyway, what do you think, Andrew? Do we? Is there anything we missed? Is there anything that Alana or Sydney you want to add to this, or Andrew? Is there a final question that we should do?
Nothing particularly jumps to mind. I just think it's interesting or worthwhile to consider just how much a Democrat will be actually able to get away with, and what amount of pushback they will put up against the refusal on the one hand of the banks and the inability to do major social welfare spending if it were a Bernie style person, unless you had, balls to the wall, expropriate the expropriators. And then on the other side, the fact that the Democrats did absolutely nothing to push back on the growth of white nationalism within the Tea Party. Trump is, if one thing is sure, it's the fact that his entire political existence comes out of birtherism.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's true.
Well, I don't know if I would agree with that. I mean, obviously that was something that he was doing, and I thought it was back in 2011, which was really a horrible thing. But I think he ran for president, or hinted at running for president, going back into the 90s. So
okay, yeah,
I would just say, he's got a lot on his record.
right.
Yeah, that actually is. I was agreeing with Andrew. It's terrible. I'm sounding like I'm trying to please everyone, which is something I rarely try to do. But Alana, this is why it's good to have a conversation like this with, we have four voices here and a lot of divergence. Even though I think surely Andrew, Sydney, and I would identify ourselves on the left, and Alana, you're a reporter and you don't take openly political positions, but we all four have pretty distinct personalities and pretty distinct views. And so it's not that I'm trying to agree. I love to disagree more than agree, but I keep hearing smart opinions being voiced that slightly alter my opinion. Like, for example, I said AOC worked for Ted Kennedy for 8 years and I was off by 7. That does change my view of AOC. So anyway, to reduce Trump to birtherism is not right. He tapped into a moment. He was running against, 18 with an 18 midget. There's a famous line
Something
by...
like that. I don't think so.
Yeah.
Was it 18 at that point? It was a lot.
It was a lot.
He wasn't running. He wasn't running at the time. He was just hinting at running, right?
Right, exactly. But
Yeah.
there's a famous line, and this is the last thing I have to say, and I'm going to say goodnight unless you all want to keep talking. But Studs Terkel, the lefty writer from Chicago, I think, great reporter, great man, once said something to the effect that, when you're in a room filled with people who are 2 feet tall and somebody 2 feet 5 stands up, he looks like a giant. And that's what happened with Trump in the, he was surrounded by midgets and he is tall.
I completely disagree with you on that, Ken. This is a longer, I think that Trump, like you said, he is a master communicator. Whatever you think about his policies, he ran an incredible campaign that went up against everything that we previously thought we knew about politics, about how to act in a presidential election. And I wouldn't say that it was against ministers. This was against people who were the Republican Party's brightest stars. Marco Rubio, who was extremely popular with Republicans.
Yeah, and who can barely read up the teleprompter. He was popular and backed by big money, but the guy is not real smart.
Yeah. But it wasn't, this was not like Newt Gingrich and the people who were running in 2012, who were kind of like has-beens or really like kind of small figures who maybe had some exposure because of Fox News. You had Jeb Bush, who had a lot of money behind him. And I think that's kind of what I think about the Democratic field right now. Like, I think that they do have a lot of stars. I think that there's very few people who can run successfully against Trump after what we saw in 2016. And I
Trump
think
knows
that
how to talk to stupid people, and I don't think that the Democrats do. So that's going to be a problem.
That is a very good point. Well, I say we give Sydney the final word, because we could keep talking forever, but I love, that is a great line, and I think it's the perfect time to close.
The following has been produced as part of a crowdfunding campaign for the website Washington Babylon, edited by the investigative journalist Ken Silverstein. If you would like to support Ken's investigation, visit patreon.com/DCBabylon. That's patreon.com/DCBabylon.
It's common to find corrupt members of Congress, but Senator Marco Rubio, really, I can't think of anyone dirtier. Going back to his early days, his brother-in-law, as I recall, was a coke trafficker, and young Marco, as a teenager, used to, as I recall, walk the dogs and mow the lawn of the brother-in-laws. The thing is, you could say, well, he was just the dog walker or the lawnmower, but this was a major coke trafficker, and little Marco never noticed anything funny. They were dealing a ton of, well, I don't want to say 2,000 pounds. It probably was more. I don't really know. It was a major drug trafficking operation, and little Marco was too goddamn stupid to notice anything, or maybe he did notice something, and they paid him, $100 an hour to walk the dogs. I can't answer that question, but that's one of the things I'm going to be looking at. There are so many. He has a long-time association with one of the most crooked individuals in the state of Florida. And when you say one of the most crooked individuals in the state of Florida, I don't even know what compares to that. In the city of New Orleans, in the city of Chicago, in the outer circles of hell, David Rivera. They are long-time party friends, love to party, love to go out on the town and have a good time, love to consort with lobbyists. He's a family man, so I would not want to cast aspersions on he or Mr. Rivera. However, if one were to do a Google search, one would find some very interesting things. I've written a few things about Mr. Rubio. I won't call him Senator Rubio. That's a degraded term as it is. But this is a guy who, I wrote a story for the New York Observer. Anybody can Google my name, Marco Rubio, and I did a few stories, but one in particular will come up about his real estate transactions, where, let's just say he obtained his first house. I think he had 3 houses. I can't remember how many lady friends. Just friends. I'm not saying they were girlfriends or lovers. I'm just saying they were intimate companions. Good family man. So I wouldn't want to suggest in any way there was more than that. But you can read my New York Observer piece where he declined comment on anything having to do with how he obtained housing, his homes very, 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 very cheaply, and always managed to make money on these real estate transactions where campaign donors or bankers he knew, or people who might, again, I don't want to cast aspersions, but people who might want favors from Mr. Rubio helped him out. There was a crooked doctor involved in one of these transactions, a Medicare fraudster. He's got a lot of interesting friends. And he had no comment about this. if I were called and said, "Are you a crook? And do you like to party with David Rivera? And do you have some intimate lobbyist female companions?" I don't care personally what people do in their private lives, but if you're a U.S. senator, as Mr. Rubio is, a lot of what he does has the appearance of impropriety. So I'll be looking into the dirty, dirty past of this man, but I'll be also focusing on his disgusting role as the chief cheerleader and sponsor of the attempt to overthrow the government of Venezuela. I mean, I would say the three most powerful individuals all should be rotting in jail cells are Rubio, John Bolton, and Elliot Abrams. And Rubio was there first. I mean, Trump ultimately bears responsibility for the criminal sanctions that are punishing the people of Venezuela, strangling the country, and not harming the leadership. And no question, there is serious corruption among the leadership in the Venezuelan government. I mean, that's not even open to question. However, they're not hurting President Maduro in any way. I understand why the Venezuelan people are tired and exhausted, and they are not happy necessarily with President Maduro. But I have been to Venezuela a few months ago, and I'll be going back as part of my reporting, in addition to going down to Florida. So we very definitely need to raise some money for this story. The situation there, I'm not going to say it's 100% the cause of the United States, but you read newspaper stories where they say the people are starving. Well, the government does give a monthly food basket to everybody in the poor areas, which is most of the country. I saw it with my own eyes and wrote about it at Washington Babylon, Caracas Chronicles. If you Google that and Washington Babylon, you'll find this story. You'll find pictures. I was in the poor areas where I was, fed, well taken care of. I'm not going to say Venezuela is a paradise. Of course it's not. It's a very difficult situation. It's complicated, but if there's any man who is evil in regard to his conduct towards Venezuela, it's Marco Rubio. I mean, you have to sort of wonder, because he's, famously, his family were Cuban fascists, anti-Castro. But I don't know why he's got a hard-on for Venezuela. I mean, and this is one of the things I'll be looking at. Something's there. Maybe he took some dirty money, speculation, of course, from a Venezuelan businessman close to the government and got burned on the deal. I don't know what his obsession is. And lastly, I am also going to be focusing on his best friend in Venezuela, Leopoldo Lopez, praised in the U.S. media as a hero and a freedom fighter. I can guarantee you this guy is going to look very, very ugly when I'm done with my reporting. His family is extremely rich. They own a lot of property. I don't believe all that property was obtained legally or that they've disclosed the ownership of it. And Leopoldo Lopez is a party goer just like Marco Rubio. Marco used to mow the lawn for coke traffickers. I don't know. I mean, I've just heard stories. It may have just been NyQuil, but, from what I understand, Mr. Lopez, the Trump administration's bitch in Venezuela, and Marco Rubio's God knows what, potentially a business partner, who the hell knows. They are not going to be happy with what I report. That's what I can guarantee you. I can't guarantee you I'll uncover every stone and find every fact, but I will guarantee you that Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, John Bolton, Elliot Abrams, and Leopoldo Lopez are going to be pissed off when they see my report. All I'm looking for is $1,200 because I know everybody's pressed for money. That's not even going to cover my costs. I'm looking for money elsewhere. I'm trying to find a sponsor that'll pay for my plane ticket to Venezuela. I mean, there's $1,200. The expenses aren't going to come close. I got to go to Florida. I'm happy to do it. It's going to be a great reporting trip. Down to Miami, possibly Tallahassee, and to Caracas. So that's not going to be, at 1,200, I'm going to lose. But I'm going to raise other money, and we'll publish some great stories at Washington Babylon, and I'll probably publish a few stories elsewhere to make money, because I got to hustle. Because, as you know, journalism is not the most profitable profession unless you are, well, like a lot of our U.S. journalists, not terribly critical or skeptical or honest. And that's, the fastest route to success. But we try to do a little bit better at Washington Babylon.
Preceding has been produced as part of a crowdfunding campaign for the website Washington Babylon, edited by the investigative journalist Ken Silverstein. Music credits are as follows. The songs Hacienda and Akari were produced and distributed by the website Filmstro, while The Internationale was produced by Jerry Engelbach. All music has been used in this package on the basis of properly recognized and adhered to licenses with their creators. If you would like to support Ken's investigation, visit patreon.com/DCBabylon. That's patreon.com/DCBabylon. And now a quick conversation with journalist Sam Husseini about his vote pact strategy. So, Sam, we've now come into 2019, and last time we spoke, it was Trump and Clinton looking like they were going to be the nominees of their respective parties. The primaries were not finished, but it looked pretty clear. And now we're at a point where the Democrats seem to be mimicking what the Republicans had last time with 20 or 30 different given candidates. I'm wondering what your thoughts are after so many election cycles of having seen these productions.
It's, there's obviously the establishment media is trying to build up a sort of inevitability around Biden in terms of saying that he's the most electable, in part because of the name recognition, in part because of the association with Obama, although that's somewhat unearned. And that's, I think that's, could be extremely detrimental. And I think sort of argues for my vote pact strategy, because the rationale of going with somebody like Biden is to, in effect, tell everybody allegedly to the left of Trump, I guess, you got no place else to go. And vote pact says, or you got no place else to go that, might not come back to bite you. And vote pact says, no, that's not true. People do have a place to go. And, and briefly, the vote pact strategy is to say, for lack of a better term, a disenchanted Democrat and disenchanted Republican, instead of both feeling like they got to vote for their de facto parties, since they hate and fear the other one, is to team up and both vote for independent or third-party candidates of their choice. So by forming their bond together, they overcome the what I would regard as the constant manipulation of the establishment parties to keep them in their partisan boxes.
Right.
So, a lot of people, including some friends who are Greens in 2016, said, come on, vote Green. There's no way Trump will win. Well, that's not what happened.
Right.
So you need to be careful, I think. mean, I can see some rationales for saying, I still would vote for Green Party candidates and so on. And I certainly respect that, but I feel like that argument was a wrong one, and Vote Pact overcomes that by saying it doesn't matter what the polls say. I'm not going to live and die by what state I live in and whether or not it's a so-called safe state. And I'm not going to be part of, what I call the punditocracy, the pundification of the populace. That is, you get sucked into this game of saying who's the most electable, and you end up never getting to the point of saying who do I actually want to be president?
Mm-hmm.
Who do I actually agree with on the issues?
Right.
Who do I, what kind of, what do I actually want? And it's a perpetual trap because it's there every 4 years. And, there's virtually no indication that it's going to be any different, the next 4 years than this 4 years. If anything, it sort of gets worse and worse.
Right.
The strategy requires meaningful dialogue with someone across the so-called two-party divide. It can be a friend, a relative, a neighbor, a coworker, a debating partner, somebody who you actually avoid talking politics with because you like them but don't want to disagree with them. Turn it around and actually disagree with them in a mature manner and say, well, look, we can work together here. We're each other's ticket to freedom because, if we trust each other, I know that if we agree, you won't vote for Trump and I won't vote for a corrupt Democratic nominee. And we can, also it opens the door to dialogue saying, oh, I agree with you on, that issue and that issue and that issue, even though we disagree on something else. So it has a lot of ancillary benefits. And I think that, I'm glad you called me, Andrew, because I think, talking about this now, helps set the stage for, like you say, this Democratic Party nomination process. One of the other interesting candidates I should mention, of course, is Mike Gravel, who I'm a little unclear as to whether or not he's technically running for president or simply technically running in a more honest way. I guess a lot of the candidates are running not to win, but just to, sound out on some issues. I guess in terms of other ones, it's a matter of, money and paying for political consultants and all that kind of thing. In the case of Mike Gravel, former senator from Alaska, who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record and helped end the draft. It's a matter of wanting to raise issues, particularly regarding militarism, but income inequality and other critical issues as well.
Right. So one of the pushbacks I get very quickly when I introduce this idea to people is they say, oh, that's vote swapping, like that idea that was brought up in 2000 by somebody who was ultimately, I guess, affiliated with the Democrats. And what's your response to that?
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. That got a lot of hype, and it actually got a fair amount of hype in 2016 again, and people are often confused by it. Vote swapping basically says if I'm wanting to vote for say the Green Party, but I live in a so-called swing state, I live in Ohio, I will swap my vote with somebody in a so-called safe state like New York or Texas or something. It's a loser strategy. It's in effect saying we want to minimize the impact of, Green or other independent parties. It in effect concedes their irrelevance from the get-go. It doesn't build up dialogue across the political spectrum. It's like, vote swap, vote pact is like marriage, and vote swapping is like prostitution, basically. I mean, there's no technical money in exchanging hands, but it's a purely mercenary relationship. Vote pact, in contrast to minimizing the so-called damage of independent third parties, vote pact, taken to its logical extreme, could be a winning strategy for a candidate that speaks to the anti-establishment center. That is, instead of 5 votes going for the Democrat and 5 votes going for Trump, 1 vote pact gets you 4 votes for Trump, 4 votes for the Democrats, and 2 votes for an independent run. If they both end up voting for the same person, which I argue is possible, they could end up voting for 2 separate people. And then if you do that enough times, that builds up third-party candidates, arguably the same candidate. That is, if you look at somebody like Ron Paul and Dennis Kucinich, who happen to be personal friends, they agree on a lot of critical issues. That is, militarization, civil liberties, whole assortment of anti-establishment things that get pushed aside to the margins by the establishment parties, but could end up being, part of the same ticket. So Vote Pact actually opens the door to genuinely upending the political spectrum if taken seriously and if taken to its logical conclusions.
Right. So another pitfall I encounter sometimes is it's easy for right-wingers or those who would call themselves conservatives, libertarians, the types of people who vote for Republicans and say, oh yeah, I know liberals and probably are friendly or love some of them. And for progressives and more radical people, it's actually a bit of a badge of shame to be admitting or say that you socialize with Trump voters and people who would go for that nativist appeal.
Yeah, I guess I've seen parts of that. I remember in 2016 somebody put up a Facebook app that let you block out all of the stuff that from Trump supporters. I think you have to be able to listen to people, and you have to be able to talk to people who might disagree with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a perversion of so-called liberalism that should, act on a basis of being able to exchange ideas in a free and open-minded manner. That it would somehow be a badge of shame to, talk to, people who might support Trump or might be right-wing in some ways or something like that. Liberals should be embracing dialogue, not trashing it.
Right. And I think there's been a lot of instances we can see that it's been promoted, that sort of divisiveness, for very cynical purposes on behalf of the Democratic Party leadership as opposed to genuine principled reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see it even now with how, I think a fair number of establishment Democratic Party apparatchiks slammed Sanders for going on Fox, even though, Hillary Clinton went on Fox. So it's really selective as to when they, decide that it's okay to have a dialogue with the right wing. I mean, yeah, it's great. I mean, the Democratic Party establishment colludes constantly with the right wing. I mean, Rachel Maddow is now backing Bolton, and attacking Trump, if he might not be Venezuela as Bolton wants to be, for example, or Iran for that matter. They're constantly colluding together, the establishment of the Democratic Party with the right wing, on issue after issue. So, they simply don't want authentic progressives to dialogue with what I would regard as authentic conservatives on issues that might challenge the establishment center. They want to isolate people. They want to keep them on their tiny little islands rather than being able to dialogue with people across the political spectrum.
Right. And I remember we talked previously about how activists in things like Palestine solidarity have pointed out that the secular left in America has always been stuck in a certain ideological and political cul-de-sac, while the real movers and shakers have been religious activists who come out of churches with a social conscience, and that has been an avenue that can cross divides in this regard.
Absolutely. I don't quite remember that discussion. I mean, something that I've been following lately has been these Catholic workers who are coming up for trial in Georgia, who have gotten not a lot of media coverage for challenging policy of nuclear weapons, and they're called plowshares movements. They're from the Berrigan brothers. One of them is actually the widow of one of the Berrigan brothers who were famous for opposing the Vietnam War, who were priests. And they're facing decades of prison time for having broken into a nuclear base and symbolically, done plowshares, beating swords into plowshares, beating nuclear weapons into plowshares. So I think you find a great deal of commitment in some religious quarters. You see that in some Orthodox Jews who are anti-Zionists, and who have a far more radical perspective than your typical quote unquote liberal activist.
Right.
So yeah, I think that religion adds a totally another dimension on these things as well.
Right. And I'm wondering if there's other realms of civic engagement that you think jump to mind where people of differing opinions end up socializing despite their differences. Because religion and politics are always those two dinner table conversations you're never supposed to have, actually.
Yeah, absolutely right. I'm feeling a bit, out of my element in that because, I've advocated this for a number of election cycles, and, it's caught on a bit here and there, but never to the extent that I'd really wanted it to. So I wouldn't be surprised if there are dimensions that I'm not seeing or I'm not knowing how to tap into, or just the organizational capacity. I'm really hoping that people who get a glimpse of this idea look at what I've done on votepack.org and on Facebook and Twitter and stuff, to the extent that you can do stuff there on this kind of thing, because I think all those things are sort of set up to keep the two-party set up going, to try to figure out how to break out of it exactly. I think it's desperate work that needs to be done, and I'd love to highlight it.
Right.
To the extent that I see it, I think like the nature of political debates, it's devolved from issues to total partisan hackery, whereas I think it should evolve to issues and then going beyond just talking about issues about how to actually act and vote in a way that actually undermines the constraints that the establishment attempts to impose. And it's on so many levels. I mean, polling, for example, the standard polling question is, which of the following, if the election were held today, which of the following would you vote for? They never, the system is such that you virtually never get to the point of who do you want to be president. At each point in the process, it's attempting to manage what the choices are of the citizen and to isolate them. People, I think, want to be free, and we have a very limited number of institutions to help do that. I'm hoping we can find that space. I'm not sure beyond that.
Okay. What's your interaction and feedback been with Ralph Nader? I believe you mentioned one time that you brought this up to him previously.
It's been funny. Sometimes he's embraced Vote Pact, and sometimes he hasn't. I'm not even sure if he remembers what he did. In 2016, he was on Democracy Now! And embraced the strategy. Amy Goodman, who's interviewing him, I think, didn't quite process what he was saying, treated it as if he was talking about vote swapping, which we just discussed earlier, even though what he outlined was Vote Pact, but he didn't mention the word Vote Pact. Several years ago, I think in 2012, I brought it up to him again, and he kind of laughed at it. He laughed at the notion that the average American would go to that kind of trouble, which I found kind of disconcerting coming from him. Somebody who's pleaded for people to embrace civic participation and all kinds of things that he's stood up for, that he kind of chuckled at the notion that two people would, talk out what they actually wanted to vote for and make a pact to make an agreement that they would both not vote for the establishment parties and would instead vote for other parties. When he ran for president, I think in 2004, his webpage noted it, but he never really articulated it. And he was at like a last-minute maneuver. It was like with 2 weeks left in the election, they finally put up a big banner. But this is something that needs to start early. Again, another reason I'm very happy to be talking to you.
Cool. Are there any other things that you think are worth mentioning about either Vote Pact or the political landscape we're seeing evolve in front of our eyes, so to speak?
I think you covered a lot of the bases, Andrew. I would definitely encourage people to check out what I have been able to do, along with some other people, at votepact.org. And I really welcome ideas. People can email me at sam@votepact.org. I remember one of the Ron Paul campaigns, some people came out of that really energized and helped out some and made a bunch of flyers, and I think that this idea lends itself to being depicted in terms of video and other memes and all that kind of stuff. But I'd love to hear back from your listeners in terms of where how this core idea, this kernel of an idea, can genuinely develop to try to undermine the what I regard as the suffocating imposition of the establishment.
Thanks for listening, and be sure to tune in next week. This is the Washington Babylon podcast, hosted by Ken Silverstein and produced by Andrew Stewart.